The first thing I learned about the Amazon was how it ate sound. On the flight from Manaus to a dirt airstrip, the pilot shouted facts over the engine roar. Rivers wider than cities, trees older than stories. But the jungle waited, listening. When we landed and the engine died, the silence felt padded, as if the rainforest wrapped a hand around every noise and dragged it into leaves. Our team was small. Lila, a botanist whose patience was almost aggressive. Raoul, a local guide with a scar across his eyebrow. Jess, a medic who smiled whenever she was afraid. And me, a journalist with a grant to write about plant-based anti-malarial trials. We came for Cinchona relatives rumored to be sprouting along a Blackwater tributary, near old mining claims eaten by vines. Raoul squinted at the sky as he cinched his pack. 3 days to the river bend, he said. If the rains behave. The rains won't, Lila said. She smiled without warmth and shouldered a canvas bag of vials and notebooks. They never behave. We hired 2 teenage boys from the village to help load biofuel drums into the aluminum canoe that would take us along a Blackwater tributary until the current turned to rapids. The boys warned us about snakes, then about men. They didn't warn us about silence. The river moved like smoked glass. We slid under cathedral vaults of trees webbed with epiphytes. Fish snapped at insects, and caimans watched with soft prehistoric eyes. The canoe's wake erased itself almost instantly. Late afternoon brought hammering rain and the sweet, metallic smell of wet bark. We pitched camp on a narrow shelf of mud above the high water line. Lila recorded ambient humidity on her phone until the case fogged. Jess boiled water and doctored it with an electrolyte powder that stained her lips pink. Raoul and I worked a tarp into the trees and failed to keep the smoke of our cooking fire from coiling back into our faces. That night the rain softened to a steady breath. I woke to a sound. Not an animal. Not wind. A plucked string, close by. One note tapped from something hollow. It repeated, irregular. I tightened in my hammock, knuckles whitening on the paracord. Raoul's silhouette shifted. I heard his machete slide. The sound stopped. It left a shape behind, like how lightning leaves your eyes full of ghosts. In the morning, we found prints where no prints should have been. Bare feet, small, almost childlike, pressed into the slick mud between our hammocks and the waterline, toes splayed as if bracing against the current. Lila crouched to photograph them with a scale card. Jess said, "Kids," then remembered where we were and said nothing else. "A tribe?" I asked. Raoul shook his head. "Not here. Not this side." He didn't explain further. The boys in the village had said a name in Portuguese, Banzero, that meant the river's rough, deceptive water. Raoul had dismissed it, said it also meant uproar, commotion. "Don't carry stories into the forest," he'd said then. Now he stole a glance at the trees, and the trees stole it back. We broke camp late because the rain pinned us, a fist on the tarp. When it eased, Jess found a strip of palm fiber tied around a sapling at shoulder height. A marker, thin as a shoelace, knotted twice. Raoul cut it down and pocketed it. "Trail signs," he said. "Not ours." He didn't say whose. When I pressed, he said, "Maps from fear keep people moving until the map becomes." We moved upriver, and the jungle came closer. Lianas trailed into the water like hair. Spider webs spanned gaps at face height, crown to crown. Lila was meticulous about brushing them aside with a stick and apologizing out loud as if the spiders had a union and she feared fines. Jess hummed to herself, a tuneless line that kept cadence with her paddle strokes. Raoul stayed on the bank with me, machete clipping undergrowth, eyes flicking between the animal trails and the dark spaces beyond. On the second day, we found a shirt snagged on a palm frond. It was the kind miners bought in bundles, synthetic blue, with the ghost of a brand name peeling from the back. The fabric smelled of mildew and something medicinal. Jess turned it over with the tip of her boot. No blood. No owner either, Lila said. Give me the GPS mark. She grimaced at a mosquito drilling her calf and did not swat it. I hate feeding creatures I can't name. By late afternoon, the river shallowed into riffles. Raoul raised a hand and we beached on a bank armored with roots. From here, the old trail. He pointed to a faint groove that fanned into the trees and was promptly eaten by ferns. Camp by the clay wall. Why there? I asked. Because there's room for 4 hammocks and not many rooms left. The clay wall was exactly that. A scar where the river had bitten away the shore, revealing a raw ochre face threaded with roots like abandoned stitches. We rigged the tarp. Lila set out a line of sample jars. I went to piss, following Raoul's warning not to stray far because the forest likes collectors. When I returned, Jess had her sleeves rolled up and was sterilizing a needle with a lighter. "Who's the patient?" I asked. She held up a vial. Leishmaniasis screen. Lila thinks the sandflies are testing us. After we ate, Raoul produced a worn deck of cards and invited Misfortune to sit down. We played 31 with damp rules. Every few hands, the plucked string returned, a single note from somewhere behind the clay wall, then silence. Jess said it was a frog. Lila said it was a cicada with a damaged wing. Raoul said nothing until the 4th time, when he collected the cards, wrapped them in a bandana, and stowed them with the reverence of a minor saint. We sleep now. Rain started again, light but endless, a murmured argument across leaves. The staccato note woke me twice. The 3rd time, I felt warm breath on my ankle. I flinched so hard my hammock rocked. I saw nothing but the faint glow of Jess's headlamp under the tarp and, beyond it, blackness like wet velvet. At dawn, the river's edge had moved. Not receded or risen, shifted sideways like a thought that won't quite land. The canoe sat at a new angle, stern pointing to where our footprints had been. The childlike prints were back, more of them, some overlapping ours. Lila touched one and shuddered. "They're cold. Everything is cold at dawn," I said. She shook her head. "Not like this." Raoul took out a small, dirty charm made of beads and a tooth. He tied it to the center tie out of the tarp. Jess raised an eyebrow. Raoul said, "For luck." He did not meet my eye, and I did not ask if he'd always brought luck to work. The air smelled of crushed leaves and old iron. Somewhere far off, a howler's roar unzipped the afternoon and stitched it closed again. By midday, the trail became a corridor of daylight where the canopy had been ripped open years earlier. Yellowing palm fronds lay like fallen ribs. We heard bees. The air tasted of resin and something scorched. Lila stopped dead, attention tightening like a lens. "Cinchonas," she whispered, pointing to a stand of mottled bark trees. "And there, hevea." This was tapped. The sudden industry of it made the jungle look arranged, like a stage after a show, props left where hands abandoned them. We found the camp in a belly of land half circled by berms. A dozen huts sagged under plastic sheeting. Pans, lengths of hose, fuel drums, and a rusting centrifuge for separating gold from sludge. Jess picked up a bottle labeled with a skull and waved it once, fanning the fumes away. "Mercury," she said. "My favorite." The fever had been busy. Mattresses were stacked and stained. A pair of boots held a snail the size of my fist. A nurse's notebook rested on a crate, pages fused by water into a single pulp brick. In the largest hut, Someone had painted a ring on the floor in engine oil. Inside the ring, a handful of charms, beads, feathers, teeth, the foil seal from a soda bottle, were arranged precisely around a plastic rosary. The arrangement was too neat for accident, too deliberate for comfort. Lila crouched and did not touch anything. Protective or punitive? She asked no one. Raoul stood at the doorway and crossed himself quickly. We don't stay here. But the berms offered the only high, dry ground, and the rain bore down like a decision. We cleaned one hut with rags dipped in boiled water and smoke. Jess burned the oil ring with a lighter and a hiss of disgust. Superstitions are for people with options. Who says we have any? Raoul said, but quietly. Night fell, and the camp changed. The plucked note threaded the rain, now unquestionably within the clearing, as if something were playing a hollow reed by tapping its nail. Lila whispered through the dark. It's the wind in the demolished canopy. The wind is still, Jess whispered back. I woke to movement under my back. Not an insect or small animal. A shift inside the wood platform itself. As if the boards had taken a breath. I froze. The breath subsided. In that emptied space, another sound rose. The faintest chant, consonants rubbing together without vowels, like charcoal scraped across bark. I couldn't locate it. The clearest thing was the feel of my own pulse in my lips. When dawn scraped into the clearing, we discovered our food cache was open, but not emptied. Several packets were slit precisely, contents tasted and rejected. Footprints again, but not only bare. Boot prints we had not made, narrower and lighter than any of ours, appearing and vanishing as if the maker remembered mid-step how to float. Jess examined the boot prints and said, "Someone's messing with us." "Or someone else is here," Lila said. "Still." Raoul's eyes moved over the tree-line as if reading a line he'd missed before. He said, "People don't abandon gold. They move away from something heavier." We decided not to split up. The plan was to map the camp perimeter, photograph everything that might identify who had been here and when, and then leave before night. The rain encouraged haste. So did the sound that followed us as we worked. Tap, tap, pause, tap, as regular as an irregular heart. A thunderhead piled itself beyond the broken canopy, its belly green. We worked faster, swatting gnats that drank from our eyelids without apology. We didn't finish. Late afternoon flattened to a dim green hallway, and Raoul said we needed to go now. The river bend was half a day behind us if we ran the trail and didn't trip. Lila boxed her samples. Jess wrapped a cut on her hand in gauze. I took one last pass through the big hut, feeling watched by objects. When I stepped outside, Jess was staring at the tree line like it had spoken. "Did you hear?" she started, and then we all heard the scream. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal, either. It had the shape of a human scream, rising urgency, held too long, played through a throat that didn't belong to it. It came from past the berms. Another followed, closer, then the single tapping note, immediate, like a nail pressed to the skin of our clearing. Raoul shouted, "Move!" and we moved. The trail narrowed to a suggestion. Twice we lost the groove and had to circle until Raoul found a break where something big had pushed through, time-stamped by the way plants were springing back. Footprints appeared and vanished ahead of us. Once a print crossed one of mine, heel over toe, smaller, lighter, wrong. Lila muttered Latin names like a rosary. Jess's breathing whistled. Dusk was a denial. The rain quit. The jungle filled the absence with drip, tick, wing beat, and the sliding whisper that might be a snake or might be leaves remembering how to move. The scream came again. "Harpy eagle," Jess said. "Maybe." No one believed her. The tapping threaded it, closer than it had a right to be, skipping ahead like a child playing stones across water. We stopped at the clay wall because the trail forced us to. The river had risen and scoured away our platform. The canoe, anchored on a root, stood sideways. Raoul didn't hesitate. He slung his pack and waded. The water reached his waist and pulled. "One at a time," he shouted. "No lights." Lila went next. Then Jess. I stepped in last, and the cold climbed my thighs. The current shoved. Behind me, from the trees, something knocked on wood twice, polite. The impulse to answer was so strong I bit my tongue until I tasted iron. Mid-river, Lila slipped. Jess grabbed her. Raoul reached back and caught my strap. For a heartbeat our bodies were a chain across the water, each pulling the next. That was when I saw them. 3 heads above the far bank, ash-white with mud, hair plastered with leaves, eyes reflecting nothing. Children, or what children might look like if a fever drew their faces from the inside out. They watched us, and one lifted a hand, fingers webbed with algae. It tapped its nail on a root. Tap, tap, tap. We made the bank. When I looked back, the river showed wet green. We ran until night landed. Raoul would not let us camp. We kept moving, mouths salt with fear. Once a whisper, "Volta," brushed my ear, Portuguese for "come back" or "turn." Jess heard it too. She doesn't speak Portuguese. At dawn, the airstrip was a scar cutting the forest. The pilot glanced at us and said nothing. As the plane lifted, the canopy reassembled, indifferent. In Manaus, we filed a report that read like a cautionary tale. The editor said fever killed the miners. He cut the mention of the children. He kept the tap, tap, tap. "It makes a good ending," he said. In my apartment far from rivers, the pipes tick at night, patient as breath. I listen for an answer that never comes, and still feel the urge to knock back once.